The 1990s were once hailed as the golden era of modern motorcycles. Manufacturers raced to introduce fuel injection, advanced suspensions, and lightweight materials. Yet amid all that innovation, some bikes turned out to be total disasters. A few were too heavy, too underpowered, or simply too ugly for anyone to love. Some failed because they were ahead of their time, while others collapsed under their own over-ambition. Decades later, these machines remain cautionary tales in motorcycle history. In today's list, we'll look back at 15 of the worst motorcycles of the 1990s. The machines that made riders around the world shake their heads in disappointment. Suzuki F650 Freewind. When Suzuki launched the F650 Freewind in 1997, they hoped to build a dual-purpose bike to rival BMW's F650, the mid-range adventure king of its day. On paper, it sounded promising. The Freewind borrowed Suzuki's reliable 644 cubic centimeters single-cylinder from the DR650, tuned for smoother power delivery and city comfort. But that very refinement drained the bike's spirit. It became heavy, sluggish, and almost lifeless at low RPMs. The soft suspension made highway riding wobbly, while the bulky fairings gave it an awkward, soulless look. Despite its big windscreen and comfy seat, the Freewind was neither a true tourer nor a capable off-roader. It simply sat in the middle, unwanted by both worlds. Yamaha GTS1000. In 1993, Yamaha shocked the motorcycle world with the GTS1000, a sport touring bike boldly marketed as the future of motorcycling. It came loaded with cutting-edge technology, standard ABS, electronic fuel injection, shaft drive, and most notably, a revolutionary single-sided front swing-arm suspension. Yamaha wanted to prove that the future wasn't in telescopic forks, but in bold innovation. However, things went wrong from the start. The bike was outrageously expensive, nearly twice the price of Honda's CBR1000. Weighing over 600 pounds, it felt sluggish and uninspiring, and when it broke down, repairing that exotic front suspension became a nightmare. Even Yamaha dealers struggled to service it, leaving owners stranded with a high-tech machine no one knew how to maintain. Though the GTS 1000 showcased Yamaha's engineering brilliance, it became a commercial flop. Honda Pacific Coast PC800. When Honda unveiled the Pacific Coast PC800 in 1990, they envisioned a motorcycle that could lure car drivers into the two-wheeled world. Instead of looking wild or sporty, the PC800 was smooth, quiet, and completely enclosed, almost like an oversized scooter. Its entire body was wrapped in plastic panels with a massive integrated trunk that opened like a car's. Powered by an 800cc V-twin borrowed from the Shadow series, the bike offered adequate performance but zero excitement. There was no roar, no vibration, no soul, just sterile smoothness. Although incredibly reliable and comfortable, bikers mocked it as the accountant's motorcycle, or the postman's dream. Honda had hoped to capture middle-aged riders seeking comfort and practicality, but the market wasn't ready for such a sanitized machine. By the late 1990s, the PC800 quietly disappeared, remembered today as Honda's well-built but utterly misunderstood attempt to make motorcycling too civilized. BMW R1200C. Introduced by BMW in 1997, the R1200C was meant to be a German-style cruiser, refined, high-tech, and distinct. But instead of winning over American riders, BMW ended up confusing the entire world. The R1200C looked like an odd mix of cruiser, touring, and naked bike. Its tall fuel tank, fold-up passenger seat that resembled a lounge chair, and sculpted exhaust pipes made it appear more like an art project than a motorcycle. Underneath, the 1,170 cubic centimeter boxer twin produced only 61 horsepower, far too little for a 550-pound cruiser. The result was sluggish acceleration and none of the muscular thrill riders expected. Even its cameo in Tomorrow Never Dies couldn't save it. By 2004, BMW quietly ended production. Today, the R1200C is remembered as one of the company's most infamous experiments, a cruiser built with engineering brilliance but without a rider's soul. Ducati 750 SS. In the early 1990s, Ducati tried to revive its legendary supersport line with the 750 SS, a bike meant to blend classic Italian styling with modern performance. On paper, it had all the right ingredients: sleek design, the iconic trellis frame, and a 748 cubic centimeter L-twin engine that sang the signature Ducati note. But reality turned out very different. The 750 SS was quickly criticized for poor build quality. The electrics were unreliable, the gearbox stiff, and the vibrations so severe that mirrors were practically useless. Despite its beauty, it felt rough and twitchy, especially at low speeds. Ducati cut costs to keep the price competitive, but that decision came at the expense of durability and refinement. While some vintage enthusiasts still adore its classic look, most riders remember the 750 SS as proof that not every Ducati carries the Italian magic. Many called it the Super Shaky, a bike that rattled like a washing machine but never quite performed like a true superbike. Kawasaki Zephyr 750. While high-performance superbikes like the Honda CBR and Yamaha FZR were dominating the 1990s, Kawasaki took a completely different path. They decided to turn back time with the Zephyr 750, a motorcycle meant to revive the spirit of the 1970s Z-Series legend. It was a bold idea, but one that didn't quite land. The Zephyr 750's 738 cubic centimeters inline-4, recycled from older models, produced about 75 horsepower, decent for commuting but unimpressive next to its sporty rivals. Weighing nearly 500 pounds, it felt sluggish and soft, with suspension that wobbled under pressure. Riders joked that the Zephyr was a beauty to look at, a bore to ride. Despite its vintage-inspired curves and glossy finish, the Zephyr 750 failed to connect with any real audience. To speed junkies, it was too mild. To purists, too artificial. In the end, it faded quietly into history, a reminder that nostalgia, when done wrong, can be just as forgettable as failure itself. Harley Davidson Sportster 883 Hugger. In the 1990s, Harley Davidson wanted to attract new riders with a smaller, lighter, and more approachable motorcycle. The result was the Sportster 883 Hugger. Harley believed that lowering the seat, reducing the center of gravity, and giving it the name Hugger, as in hugs the road, would make it a hit among beginners and shorter riders. But reality told a different story. The Hugger retained the iconic 883 cubic centimeters Evolution 5 twin, but it was underpowered, ran hot, and vibrated excessively. Riders joked that the mirrors turned into foggy glass every time the engine started. The short rear shocks made the ride painfully harsh, and the low seat height came at the cost of cornering ability. Many described it as a Harley with its spirit choked out. Marketed as the most beginner-friendly Harley ever, the 883 Hugger ended up pleasing no one. Too weak for veterans, too uncomfortable for newcomers. Triumph Adventurer 900. In 1996, Triumph was still rebuilding its reputation after years of silence. Determined to show that Britain could still produce powerful and distinctive motorcycles, the company made an unexpected move. Instead of sticking to its sporty roots, it decided to take on America's cruiser market. The result was the Adventurer 900. Built on the Thunderbird platform, it packed an 885 cubic centimeter triple, delivering about 70 horsepower. But the tweaks meant to give it cruiser flair threw off the balance. The tall handlebars, soft frame, and hefty weight made it clumsy in corners and unstable at higher speeds. Its deep, throaty exhaust note carried that classic British charm, yet the overall experience lacked the refinement expected from a Triumph. The Adventurer 900 wasn't rugged enough to win over American cruiser fans, nor refined enough to please loyal British riders. It sat awkwardly between two identities, like an actor trying to play two roles at once. In the end, it quietly disappeared. Honda CB1000 C Big One. When Honda launched the CB1000 Big One in the early 1990s, the goal was to revive the classic spirit of the UJM, a big, reliable, no-nonsense motorcycle. But in an era obsessed with superbikes and adrenaline, riders couldn't help but wonder, what was the point of such a massive, mellow machine? Powered by a 998 cubic centimeter inline-4 producing about 97 horsepower, the Big One wasn't weak, but its nearly 600-pound weight and bulky frame made it feel sluggish. Throttle response was lazy, cornering heavy, and overall, it lacked excitement. Some riders joked that Big One referred not to its engine size, but to how much of the road it occupied. Despite its flawless paint, smooth engine, and Honda's trademark reliability, the CB1000C was simply too polite for its own good. In a decade hungry for wild performance and edge, it came across as dull and conservative. Sales were disappointing, and the Big One quietly disappeared. Suzuki Katana 600. The name Katana was once Suzuki's pride, a symbol of speed, power, and bold design in the 1980s. But by 1998, when Suzuki revived the name for the 600cc version, everything had changed. Instead of a sharp street weapon, the Katana 600 became a clumsy, half-hearted sport bike, heavy, dated, and uninspired. Its 599 cubic centimeters inline-4 was a detuned carryover from an older GSXR, making around 80 horsepower. The problem wasn't the output, but the dull feel, sluggish throttle response, stiff gearbox, and a heavy steel frame that made it feel slow against the competition. Cheap suspension and weak brakes turned high-speed corners into a nerve-wracking experience. The glossy plastic fairings, rounded headlight, and outdated tail gave it a look straight out of the previous decade. Marketed as an entry-level sport bike, it failed to impress both beginners and veterans. Among American riders, it was mockingly called the sport bike for people who don't like sport bikes. Yamaha XJ900 Diversion. In 1995, Yamaha introduced the XJ900 Diversion, aiming to build an affordable, dependable sport touring motorcycle, the kind of bike you could ride every day without fuss. On paper, it made perfect sense. In practice, however, the Diversion turned out to be so bland that few riders ever fell in love with it. Its air-cooled 892 cubic centimeters inline-4 produced around 89 horsepower. Everything about it was fine, yet completely unexciting. Throttle response was lazy, the gearbox smooth but lifeless, and the soft suspension made it wobble through fast corners. Weighing over 550 pounds and wrapped in plain styling, the bike's only true strength was that it rarely broke down. The press at the time called it a motorcycle for people who don't know what they want. It wasn't fast enough to be a sport bike, nor comfortable enough to be a proper tourer. Reliable, yes. Economical, certainly. But thrilling? Not even close. Buell S2 Thunderbolt. In the mid-1990s, Eric Buell, a former Harley-Davidson engineer, was on a mission to create a truly American sport bike. His answer came in 1994 with the Buell S2 Thunderbolt, a machine that promised to blend American muscle with sporty handling. It sounded bold, but the reality was a rough experiment full of compromises. The Thunderbolt used Harley's 1203 cubic centimeter V-twin engine, a motor built for cruisers, not corner-carving sport bikes. The result was a nearly 500-pound bike that ran hot, vibrated excessively, and felt sluggish. Riders joked that it could rattle your teeth loose. Buell's custom frame was clever in concept, but couldn't overcome the imbalance of a massive, heat-soaked engine. Its suspension was unstable, brakes weak, and build quality inconsistent, giving the impression of a prototype rather than a finished product. Still, even critics admitted the Thunderbolt had personality. Terrible, perhaps, but uniquely so. Kawasaki Vulcan 500 LTD. In the 1990s, as America's cruiser craze hit full swing, Kawasaki tried to join the party with a smaller, more beginner-friendly machine, the Vulcan 500 LTD. The concept made sense, a lightweight, affordable cruiser for new riders. But the result proved that practicality doesn't always make passion. The Vulcan 500 borrowed its 498 cubic centimeters parallel twin from the Ninja 500R, detuned for smoother, slower cruising. The outcome was a 450-pound motorcycle producing just about 50 horsepower, underwhelming for its size. While easy to handle and pleasantly smooth, it lacked any soul. The engine sounded muted, the throttle response dull, and acceleration mild enough to lull you to sleep. Visually, the Vulcan 500 looked awkward, a miniature cruiser with odd proportions, small front wheel, and tall fuel tank that broke its flow. Veteran riders dismissed it as toothless, while beginners found it uninspiring. Today, the Vulcan 500 LTD is remembered as one of the tamest cruisers of the 1990s. Kawasaki Eliminator 125. In the late 1990s, Kawasaki decided to expand its Eliminator line with a smaller, beginner-friendly version, the Eliminator 125. The idea was to build a light, approachable cruiser for new riders. But instead of delivering the sense of freedom its name promised, it became the butt of countless biker jokes as the toy bike for adults. Powered by a tiny 124 cubic centimeter single-cylinder engine producing less than 12 horsepower, the Eliminator struggled under its 300-pound weight. Top speed barely hit 55 miles per hour, just enough to get overtaken by trucks on the highway. While it looked like a true cruiser, everything underneath felt weak and uninspired. The exhaust note was faint, throttle response sluggish, and front brake performance poor. Its biggest flaw was identity. It looked like a cruiser, but rode like a scooter. New riders quickly outgrew it, and experienced ones ignored it entirely. Today, the Eliminator 125 is remembered as one of the most gutless cruisers ever built. Harley-Davidson FXS-TB Night Train. When Harley-Davidson introduced the FXS-TB Night Train in 1999, fans expected a dark, aggressive cruiser that would embody the ultimate bad boy image of the late 20th century. And to be fair, it looked the part. at least while standing still. Powered by the 1450cc twin-cam 88 V-twin, the Night Train delivered Harley's trademark deep rumble, but once you hit the road, the illusion faded fast. The engine ran blisteringly hot, vibrated violently, and the transmission felt like shifting through concrete. With stiff suspension and stretched handlebars, long rides became a physical challenge. Many riders joked, "It looks great in the garage, but feels awful on the highway." Harley's obsession with style over substance showed clearly here. Weighing nearly 650 pounds, handling was poor and build quality inconsistent. The Night Train was intimidating to look at, but exhausting to ride. The 1990s were a bold decade for motorcycles, full of innovation and risk-taking. But as this list shows, not every dream machine became a legend. Some were overambitious, others too cautious. Yet all remind us that true progress requires passion behind the handlebars. Even the failures have their value. They represent an era when manufacturers dared to experiment, stumble, and evolve. That's why, decades later, riders still look back on these bikes with a mix of laughter and nostalgia. If you've ever ridden or seen one of these disasters, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe. Next time, we'll look at the 15 greatest motorcycles of the 1990s, the machines that truly defined a generation.